Hey guys, this is Boars, militia of the Ebon Light and leader of the Wolves of Moria realm. So recently I made a plastidip shield, shoulder shield buckler that attaches to my armor. Kind of follows the same template as the one that Rabas uses with some minor tweaks. I'm going to kind of break it down of how I built it. That way then for those that are interested can kind of follow through, or at least have a good basis of how it happened, and then how I got to this point. So I mean, this is the end result. So from start to finish it took me 72 hours over multiple weekends. So not 72 hours back to back to back, but 72 hours all together with the gluing, the custom work that I did on it, all the detail, everything else, the cutting and so on and so forth. So all that took roughly about 72 hours over several weeks. So to start off with, it's the materials that you're going to need. I started off first with making a template. So I followed Rabas, made a custom outline of his shield, and then I upgraded it to fit better all of this. So this is, this somewhat was the original size of his. Kind of templated it out because what you're going to need is, it's called stinger board. It's got like a consistency of PVC pipe, but it's hollow. So it's lightweight, but it has the durability so that as things, punch into the shield, and it's against, because this is what goes against your shoulder, or it'll go against your hand if you're making like a puncher strap. It doesn't have any flexibility, so it's rigid, and that's what you need, especially with the way that the shield is made, is there's no give to it. So how it works is that, so I made the outline on the stinger board with the outline of the shield after I had put it on myself. I found out where I wanted it, how it was going to sit, so on and so forth. I then drew it onto that stinger board and I cut it out. I used a 10-inch bandsaw. You literally only get about 3 inches. So as the foam gets thicker and the pieces start to add on, if this is what you got, get creative. So I actually started cutting pieces out beforehand, or to a certain size, because you're going to need cuts that are flush. So if you try and do this by hand, you got to make sure that it's level, because otherwise you're going to end up with really wonky edges. And a lot of the edges on here, especially this one right here, if it's not straight, or any of these edges, you're going to get angles that you can't work with, and you got to do a lot of filler work. And I didn't really want a lot of filler work because that literally decreases the stability and efficiency of the shield. So first off, first base layer is stinger board, and I cut it out on my bandsaw. From the stinger board, I went and I put 2 pieces of foam together. It's an open cell foam, has a lot of good squish to it, this white one. So it's white foam, and then it's black. It's a black foam. It's more of like a, not like a 2-pound foam, but it definitely doesn't have the consistency or the density. And this is what would go on top of the stinger board. So it looks like this. The reason being is the stinger board is a stable part that goes against the shoulder, that takes all the abuse as it hits your body. The black foam keeps the white foam from being ripped apart by spears and reds and blues and all that stuff. So the black is like the coating, the cover that goes on it. The difference between that and, let's just say, this is like puzzle mat foam. This stuff is super dense. So if you squeeze it in, it leaves an indent. With this black stuff, is you can squeeze it and it bounces back. And that's the thing, is it's meant to take the pounding but not destroy the inner foam. So as I started building it up and putting the pieces together, the stinger board is the cutout. So that became that cutout that I made. This then became the middle layer and the outer layer. And the outer layer, you can go and do your decals and stuff into this. The wood grain, what I did, I changed, instead of doing it on something like this, I put a layer of this puzzle mat foam on top of that. So I glued these pieces together first. I cut it into a rectangle that was larger than this. So it was literally a rectangle. And then I took it back to the bandsaw after I glued the stinger board to it. I glued these 3 pieces together so it came out looking like that in a big rectangle, and then I cut it down to the size of the shield itself. So I had flush edges the whole time. So I used DAP. Everybody knows what DAP is, but I went out and I just bought the most ginormous gallon, or the most biggest jug I could find. And I used this to put all 3 pieces together. I let it dry, and then I went and I started cutting it out on my bandsaw. Okay, I will post pictures with the after the video of the steps that I took and as I made it. I realized after I started making the videos, I started skipping the stuff, so that's why I apologize. I'm going back and kind of re-talking through stuff. So after I had those 3 pieces together, that white stinger board, the compact low density foam, and then the high dense black foam, I was able to start putting on my edge. So my edge is a very rigid pink foam. So this is the thickness of this pink foam, which is extremely durable, very thick, very dense, compared to puzzle mat foam, which is not. Very flexible. This stuff has very little flex. Like, it looks like it does, but as soon as you try and go and put it around the edges of the shield, there are no flex. No flexy at all. So as I started to build up the shield, I wanted some sort of edge. I know you guys can't really see it, but I have a slight edge where it stopped, and then the foam came up on top of that. So all this silver stuff is all of that pink foam, because I wanted something really durable that as I got hit on the side of the shield, it wasn't going to be like the puzzle mat foam where it was just going to more or less just get shredded. So really dense pink foam around the edges made it so that I had a really solid covering of all of this pink and black foam. So as I started to cover it, you get the pink and black, and then I started putting the pink around it, and I gave it just a small edge, so then I had a little bit of a lip, because I used this. I used the puzzle mat. I bought mine at Harbor Freight. A lot of the stuff you can buy at Home Depot, Menards has it. Honestly, look online, but I found most of the stuff I needed at Harbor Freight. I started cutting these, and I cut them into different widths, and I made them into more or less like planks of board. So I had inch, 2 inch, 3.5 inch, and then 1 4-inch. And that's where, sorry guys, I know I'm not great at making videos. You can see the different like sizes. So I've got a 2 inch, a 1, this is a 3, this is a 4, this is a 1. And that way then it made it look like it was pieces of wood. And then later I put in more texture using my wood burner. You could probably use a soldering iron, I guess. I also used a Dremel. So some of the pieces that I wanted more intricate, I used a Dremel, because the wood burner is great, but it also burns and leaves this almost charred like effect. And on some of the spots where I had, like, makes it look like, you know, a shield, or I got, you know, jacked through, or I got good cuts and stuff, I used the wood burner to kind of start it, and then I made it more of a deeper rounded edge with my Dremel. So then I got more of an intricate look. Okay, so as I'm building it up, stinger board into the white is in the middle, and the black covered by the puzzle mat. So the puzzle mat is what is this. You don't have to do it. You can use this thinner black foam. I just liked it because I like the texture of it. Again, it's more rigid, so I felt like I could get a better, you know, detail out of it. And that way then I also was able to build up the level of the shield that I wanted, because I wanted it thicker. The one that Rabas has is literally about the thickness of what it is up top. I am a big chested boy, so I wanted mine to be a lot larger, so I increased the width by adding this on. Okay, so this is pink. The edge is all that pink high density foam that really, it's very heavy, very durable, very dense all around the edges. Okay, so as I finished, I glued on my wood looking pieces first. I left them so that they were long, and I went back to my bandsaw and I cut out all of the pieces so that it was flush with the edge. Okay, once I did that, then I came back with the pink foam and made it so then I had somewhat of a lip on it, so then I could go and bevel those edges, because all my edges are beveled. Only thing that's not beveled is parts of my wolf, because I wanted them to stand up, but they're all beveled edges. And I used a sander. Okay, I used an orbital sander. You can use a reciprocating sander, but I noticed that that didn't leave a very good edge, and also ripped up the foam. So a lot of the foam, it does not take well to really heavy grit. I think for sand, the sandpaper is, I went with maybe, I think this is 100 grit, if anything. And then I went all the way down to the point of where it's absolutely smooth. And I used that smooth one to give a really nice rounded edges without ripping up the foam and leaving these like shredded pieces on the end. Okay, so from start to that point of where I started putting on the pink foam, Stinger board, the white, pretty much open cell foam into a dense, almost like a thin layer of yoga mat. And then I started putting on this layer of my foam, my puzzle mat foam. And this was strictly for that wood looking grain, because again, the density of it makes it so that as it's getting compacted, the white foam is compressing, the black foam is eating up that compression, and then this kept it more so it was rigid. So even if it got punched in or got stabbed by a spear, I wouldn't have to worry about this like degrading or breaking down or dissolving, because there's enough layers to cover it up. And this I started putting around the edges. And as I got to certain parts on my shield, okay, there were certain parts on the shield, this part especially right here where it's almost rounded. I had to go back in onto my Stinger board because the edge was almost like it was angled. So I rounded it. What I did is I glued the top and the bottom ends and I pushed them into place. Okay. So this part wasn't on yet. So this is overlapping this. I put this piece on so it was sticky, wet. And while those two pieces were sticking, I pushed the middle down so I could compress it. I took another piece of foam like this, cut it roughly about the width and the length of this, and I then taped it crosswise up to the opposite side with heavy duct tape. And I used two pieces of foam, so it literally compressed them into the shape that I wanted. So I literally compressed these two edges into their place, and that's why it looks like, and on this edge is the same, that's why it looks like it's a rounded edge. Okay, so that's how I did that. I left it wet in the middle and dry on either end, so I got a really good bond, wet, so then I could wet form it into what I wanted. I guess you can try and use a heat gun. I tried the heat gun, did not work out so well. It more or less just made the edges of the foam like moldable, but it didn't really do anything as a whole. And I find that this foam does not hold a shape really well for very long. As soon as you leave it to dry with the DAP on it, it would literally just more or less peel off. So it was really semi-useless. So that's how I did that. I more or less, like leather, I wet molded it and I left it to sit for as many hours as I could before my ADD kicked in and I started trying to do it again. Okay, so Stinger board, white foam, black foam, puzzle mat foam, just for that compression aspect. I then started putting in the details. So details, you can do it however you want. I like wood grain, it's kind of my thing. And so I wanted it to be as wood grain looking as possible. So I used a wood burner and I burned along every seam of the wood that I had. I also, before I ever even go and put the wood grain look into my wood, I draw it out. So I before any of this was painted, it was just my black foam on top of everything else. So I drew out with permanent marker that some of these holes on here are arrow indents. Personalize it as much as you want. And so after that, I then went back in and I cut out with the bandsaw again my wolf, and I put it on over the top. I then used, which is something you can find at Walmart, it's called E600. Reminds me of shoe goo, for all those guys ever use shoe goo on like their skateboarding shoes. This guy. And I used E600 on all of the holes that were underneath the eyes, the ears, the fringe, all this stuff. I put it on all the edges because I know that this will be a point of ripping away. This gives it a good, it's a strong adhesive. It's not DAP. It literally is, it's like a really, industrial clear flexible gel is really what it is. And I put that into the edges of my cracks because once I started to spray paint and paint it, I knew that it was either going to peel away or whatever. And I did this all before I started doing the plastidip, okay? Because this is a plastidip shield. That's why you can see the intricacies of it. That's why, it looks as it looks. Before I did any plastidipping or any painting of any kind, it was all plain, black foam, white stringer board, all that stuff. I put all this on, so then when I started plastidipping, which this is coming from Rabas, buy 2 different colors of plastidip. I first time around did not think it through, and I bought just strictly black. This is just like a dip. Buy the spray can, buy it like a gray, buy a white, buy a black. So then when you do your coats, you can actually tell where you miss spots and stuff, so then you're not assuming that you get it. Because the problem with plastidip is that if you miss a spot, it becomes a soft point. And so after a while, as if the shield gets hit in that spot over and over again, it literally will just ruin the shield. And now you're gonna have to redo it, and that absolutely freaking sucks. So I plastidiped it. I gave it 5 coats. I sprayed it 5 times around the whole entire thing. So it was black, white, black, white, black, white, black. Okay. I then went and I spray painted the edge silver. So you can sort of see it on the edge of the shield here. I spray painted it silver, and then I took a cloth and black paint and I buffed it so then it looked like it's not silver. Okay, so that's how that worked. I then did hand painting. I hand painted the rest, threw on some blood and some splatter of some stuff, but again, it took me 72 hours. So materials you're going to need is the stinger board. Okay, you're going to need some form of something that has a rigid yet light consistency, because this is going to be the base of the shield. Like mine rests on my shoulder, on my armor. So does Rabas. His is the same. If that's what you're going for, honestly, it's the best option, because otherwise you're going to have to strap that sucker, and it gets uncomfortable because stinger board has 0 give to it. It's not like a Gorg foam shield. There's no give here. It's plastic. It reminds me of like a PVC pipe. Okay, so this is the base. Okay, so I templated it. I then